Today's presentation is going to be on creating Warehouse Insight overrides. My name is Raymond. I've been a developer at InsightWorks for maybe about 15 or more years. Primarily, I'm working on the Warehouse Insight applications as well as order fulfilling worksheet and license plate management products. But I have touched on pretty much all of our products at one point over the course of my career here. But today, like I said, we are just going to focus primarily on the Warehouse Insight application overrides. Okay, so the agenda for today's session, we're just going to cover the event architecture, just get us a little high-level overview of what it is and what our options are. Then we're going to dig into some of them, and first one we're going to cover is standard AL integration events. After that, we're going to do a quick whirlwind tour of the application designer because you need a little bit of an understanding of how to use that in order to do the next part, which is the application overrides. After that, we're just going to look briefly at the Warehouse Insight event overrides. So there's basically three options available to you when it comes to overriding some of our functionality. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you have a very solid understanding of what your options are, and you'll be able to choose the correct one for any given situation. Okay, so what are our options? Well, at a high level, we have three of them. We have AL integration events, application block overrides, and then Warehouse Insight application events. So AL integration events, those just your basically AL subscription publisher subscriber models. Okay, so the benefit of using those, of course, is it's easy to inject your code changes. So we're pretty familiar with what they all are, or how they work. But you find an event that meets your needs what's inside the AL code, and you add your slight change there. You hook into that event, and you make some changes as it's in whatever way is possible there for you. Of course, as you know, you're limited by what has already been published by us, right? So we have a couple hundred events published. We're always adding more to that list, those hooks. But until we do, you're basically limited to exactly what we've limited to what we've already published. If you do need more events added or something, feel free to let the support portal know, and we'll try to get those added into the product for you sooner than later. And of course, it doesn't allow you to do UI interactions. So if you're subscribing to AL events, you can't if you're inside Business Central and you're subscribed to an AL event, you could pop up a dialog asking for confirmation or show a page or whatever. But because we're dealing with Warehouse Insight, which is a web service calls from the handhelds into Business Central, you can't have any UI interactions using AL subscription events. And it's a drawback, maybe not for everybody, but for some people, it also then implies that you have an AL extension code unit and you know how to write AL code. Another option, though, available to you when you're doing overrides is these application block overrides. The nice benefit of those is it actually does support UI changes, so you can pop up confirmation blocks, launch whole new applications, run workflows within the flow of that change that you're doing. And for some people, you can actually write these extensions or these overrides or customizations without any AL code at all, right? So there's lots of things you can do within the application designer that doesn't actually require you to write AL code. Drawback to all this is that the person doing the customization or the override needs to be familiar a little bit with how our Blockly application designer works. And you do have a potential having a split. So you may actually require still may require an AL extension code unit, as well as having some application block code, so some XML code or application designer interface. So when you have two different parts, somebody else coming into the project after you might get confused. They might like, well, how does this work? Because I can't find the missing piece of code. You do have to manage both sides, and you have to, save it into a Git repo or whatever it is you're doing for, maintaining it long term. The other option is just a variation of the first one, the AL integration events. So we have Warehouse Insight application events. So they are also an AL subscriber event, publisher subscriber event model, but there's two specific ones that we use, and they allow you to have full control over all of our events that we handle inside Warehouse Insight. So anything we do from the handhelds flows through these two, or can flow through these two events, and you can take full ownership of whatever is happening. So if we're posting something, you can subscribe to this and you can implement the posting yourself. So regardless of whether or not we've published, specific AL integration hooks, throughout the various code, like, putting them wherever we need to do, these two events and this last one will cover everything. But it does require you to actually know a little bit about how our code base works, and, because we're doing a lot of stuff within our code. So if you're just simply updating a purchase line, well, yeah, you got the quantities to handle on the purchasing side of lines, but you might have item tracking lines you need to deal with. Maybe you have to deal with license plating, and there could be other things like assigning users to documents, stuff like that. So we're doing a bunch of stuff within our code, and if you're going to use one of these two events to totally override our functionality, you probably also need to be a little bit familiar with what we're doing, so that at least you're not missing something, or you can, willingly choose to ignore it or skip it. And as mentioned, it also still requires an AL extension code unit, which for some people isn't ideal. Okay, so let's talk about how those actually work, and let's look at some of those examples. So the very first one, standard AL integration events. Like I said, it's your standard, publisher subscriber model. Everybody in the developing side of things, I'm sure, is familiar with it and had to have used them already. We're limited to what we have published, but there is a way to find what we have published available to you. So I'm just going to bring up, a code unit here I have going. But if you do, oops, should have done that. Let's go down here. So if you do a Shift-Alt-E, okay, it's going to bring up your event search. Okay, so I don't know if you're aware of that already, but if you take a look at that there, and you can say, okay, well, I want to find the ones that are specific to Warehouse Insight. The easiest way is to actually just type in Warehouse Insight in quotes. Oh, sorry, not WHI and space, like that. Okay, so you'll see all the code units that have Warehouse Insight as have events within them, right? So we have, WHI production management, Warehouse Insight receiving management, shipping. Most of our events are contained within a parent code unit that matches the functional area that's being handled on the handhelds. So you have like receiving, shipping, production, item inquiries or inventory inquiry, so warehouse activity management, so picks, putaways, movements, that kind of thing. So if you're looking for the specific one that you want, you can filter it down further. Say you want to look for purchasing, right? So you can go WHI receiving. All right, so you see all the ones in the receiving side of things. And then most of the events are just exactly what you kind of expect them to do, right? Like it's based on the name. So, on, before, post, or something like that. So on, before, post, warehouse receipt, you can choose that one, double click it, and it'll bring in the subscription there for you, or the signature for you. We also have published to our knowledge base here, and you can see the link on the screen. I'll just bring it back. So we have, in this knowledge base, there are all the published events with the signatures and the parameters, and they're listed with them. I'm not sure if it's 100% up to date, but we do try to keep them at least somewhat current to the latest version. So, feel free to check that out if, you can't find exactly what you want using the event search within Visual Code. Lastly, of course, you can always just contact support, and we can give you, we can give you some guidance on which event you could use to hook into, and maybe even a little sample code to go along with it. And if there is an event, like I said, that you're missing that you think would benefit the product, let us know, and we'll do our best to get it in, usually as a fast follow to the current release. And yeah, we'll try to work with you to make all those events. And eventually, at some point, we'll have enough events out there that'll cover pretty much any situation you can want, but it is a work in progress. Okay, so I'm going to let that go there. So the bulk of our time today is just going to be spent getting a whirlwind tour of the application designer, and then how to use that to do application overrides. Okay, so we have just some key points. So if you haven't looked at it before, I'm going to bring it up on the screen here for you. Okay, so let's see here. So you should be able to see Business Central. So if you go to Warehouse Insight Applications, Okay, you're going to see a bunch of applications, and these match up to the areas within the handheld. So usually it's like we have a receiving list, or sorry, a lookup list, and then we have the document that goes along with it. So we might have, receiving lookup list, and then purchase order document, transfer order document, warehouse receipt document that goes along with it. So you can see something like this, like so receiving list, and then you look at transfer in, transfer out documents, those kind of things. Most of the apps follow the same pattern. So we have the lookup list and then the actual documents that get opened up as a result of them. So I'm just going to open up one here just to give you just a quick show of what's inside one of these. So if I open up the purchase order document and I hit design, okay, so a little bit, it's only read only because it's one of our base applications, and if I zoom out a little bit, a little too fuzzy there. Okay, so I'll leave it at that resolution. It looks like a lot, right? And this is the application designer. It's based on Blockly, Google's Blockly, so you can take a look at that URL that was on the screen there. It's kind of like playing with Lego. You can drag and drop on blocks, connect them up, and it flows from a top down. If you read the blocks, it flows from top to the bottom. Okay. Everything inside our applications is event driven, not publishing events, but we have these events. So something like, when the form opens, it fires that event, the when the form opens event, and then it starts to execute all the blocks, as it goes down the screen. So, it configures the fields, sets a title on the page, does a little conditional if statement, does some more of those, and it's setting up the display mode, whether we're using grid view or the card view mode, stuff like that, right? So if you look at it, all events flowing down. So when the form opens, it follows this flow down here. Now, you can think of some of these events as also being functions, but it is possible then from in here to call one of the other events the top and have those start flowing down and stuff, right? So you can expand out just as if you're programming, right? So you have different functions and events and you're hooking them all up together. Nothing happens though unless it's attached to an event. So, if I was to disassociate this whole block of stuff here from that when the form opens block, you'll see it all gets kind of shaded out with this cross, whatever you want to call it, the not check marks, what's the lattice look there, right? So it's all grayed out kind of thing. And that's because it's not associated to any event. So when the form opens now, we'll fire, but nothing is hooked up to it, so nothing will happen. And none of these blocks will ever get called because they're not associated to anything at the top level. Okay. So I'm just going to go put that right back in there. So we're looking at that. So let's take a look at, some of this application designer as a whole. So we have the workspace, which is where all these blocks are currently sitting on. It is a unlimited size, right? So you can go up and down as much as you want. Left and right, up and down. You can scroll all over the place, right? So it'll grow, it'll fit whatever you need in there. It does lead itself, though, into the same problem, which is if you start pushing stuff way off to the side of the screen, you may not see them anymore. So if I, moving this all the way over here, right? I was looking at this, like you might be tempted to think like, oh, this is all there is to this application, and you might not realize that there's stuff off to the side. But then you keep scrolling, see, oh, there it is, right? So try to keep, when you are using this, try to keep all your stuff at least close enough together so that on one screen you can see that there's still more to go, and you can keep, scrolling to go find it, kind of stuff, rather than leaving yourself wondering if it's still there. So that's the workspace. On the left-hand side, we have the toolbar. Okay. And it's got a bunch of categories for the blocks, and they're kind of organized based on their functional type. So the first thing we have is events. So any event that you can possibly use is listed in here. If it's not here, it's not an option, right? So you can't have like when a label changes event or something like that. It's just not possible. But you can look at the ones we have here, and these are what you'd be using to drag on. So as an example, if I wanted to say, when the form opens, so I wouldn't put another one, but let's say we didn't have one. So when you find when the form opens blocks, take it, drag it, put it on the screen, and then drag more blocks and put it underneath, kind of thing. So note, if you don't need a block, you can just hit the delete key. There should also be a right context menu for delete block, but deletes with your key is faster. And that'll take care of that. It'll also delete, things that are underneath it as well. So if I was to do when the form opens and drop in an interaction block like ask for a date, and then ask for a number. All right, so there you go. You don't get those, gone. Okay, but if I take that and delete the event, it'll take care of everything. Delete everything that's underneath it. Okay, so we have events. It's got a lot of things in there. Documents get scanned, barcodes get scanned, form opens, closes, stuff like that. Next category we have is interactions. Those are usually things that are popping up, UI elements to the user to interact with. So, things like message boxes, confirmation dialogues, quantity dialogues, asking for, or not asking for a picture, but like, showing a picture or asking for a signature, stuff like that. Okay, so there's lots of choices in there, and they're all colored in this nice little blue color. Next, we have the actions category, and those are things that usually affect either the UI in the sense like we can update labels, but don't have necessarily a UI pop-up that's associated with them. So things like setting the header label, calling events into Business Central, calling other functions, opening up different applications, whatever the case may be. But so they're actions you can take and help control the program flow, but they aren't necessarily going to pop up a UI element for the user to look at. Next, we have the context blocks. There's really only a couple that you're going to need to use. So use the device configuration, document header, scan barcode, and selected line. This convert decimal is just a carryover from earlier versions. So it's a good time to talk about context because it ties into the variables here. So when we say context, we're talking about all the variables that are defined on the page, plus any row that's currently selected on the line. So if you have a grid and you've selected a line, so all the field values that are for that selected line will be part of the context, as are any header information. Like, so if you had a document, so the purchase header, all the fields from the purchase header that were supplied to the page will be part of that context. You can think of context as a key value pair, like so a dictionary key value pair. So you have the field name or the variable name on the left hand side, and then the value on the right hand side. These variables, context data are global to the page. Okay, so if you're in the form opens and you set a variable like document number to the purchase order number, so you set doc number, that variable doc num will be available to you to use in any of these other blocks further down on the page, right? So it's not, we don't have the concept of a local variable within this application designer instance. Okay, so that's the context again. So when we look at the context blocks, it's like using device configuration. That's just putting all the Warehouse Insight device configuration information that's a card in Business Central into the context, so you can use it there. The document header, you put one of those blocks on, any of the fields from the document header will be added to the context. After you scan a barcode, you can use this to populate the context, the global context, with the barcode information. And of course, when you select a line, you can use the selected line block to get the current variables into the context. So what are variables? They're pretty much anything you want. So natively in Warehouse Insight, we treat all the variables as strings. Okay, so the data type for all the variables will be strings, but depending on the context in which you use them, we will cast them into Booleans or decimal fields or date fields, depending on the situation, right? So let's say you're doing a math operation and you have a variable called, age. We're not going to treat it as a string. We'll convert that to a numeric value, and then you can add that age around or do whatever you want with it. Same thing with the date, right? So if you're setting the default date on a quantity dialog, yeah, the data type is string, but we'll cast it into a date time on the backside before it gets used. Okay. You can create the variables using this create variable, and you can give it any variable you want. So my first name, kind of thing like that, right? So now you got a variable first name, and if you want to use it, you can use either this be a block you can use to get the first name in there. So if I say first name, actually, you know what, let's just make a new one here. We'll call it test. I'm going to go back into my application designer. I'm going to create a new application. So I call it test, and I'm going to design that. Okay, so now we have a blank workspace. That's a little less scary, I guess. So we'll create a first name. So first name, or to type. And then if we wanted to use that and set some variable to first name, I'm going to put a, when the form opens block, drag one of those in, set first name. So there's your variable to whatever you want. So you could, take another variable from your grid, or you could pop up a dialog asking for the first name, stuff like that. But, essentially you can just pass one of these and you could choose one of the other variables you had, or you can use this, one of these two blocks here where you could say, well, it's going to be a string variable and I'm going to just give it a value. So Raymond, right? And create a new variable. So last name. And so just a little, tip and tricks. I can copy this one or duplicate this block. So I'm just going to duplicate it. I'm going to put there like that. And then I'm going to change the variable that I'm setting to last name and then just set a last name. So that's how you can use variables there. Again, first name, last name, global to the application that you're in. You can use the integer variable as well. So, age. And I can set that variable age to be in a hard-coded value again. And I am now 49. So there you go. So, just using variables, not overly complex, but again, just something to keep in mind when you're looking at the page. You can see, where the variable might get used or might get set, because you may need to know the variable names in order to do your application override. Won't get too much into these. We have a course on actually, creating a custom application, and we go a little bit more in depth in all these things here. Okay. So last two categories we have some logic blocks, so some conditional program flow kind of stuff. So if else's, if do else's, that kind of stuff. So you can drag one on. We've given the standard ones you'd use. So if else or if else do else kind of thing, right? So another else. If you want to build them up yourself, though, it's pretty easy. You just click on this little gear symbol here and you drag in something you want. So you can drag in another else if to right here, and it'll add it in, and then you can put another else in there, or you can take it out and drop another else if in there. Don't get crazy. I wouldn't go past really the 3 levels that we have like this. If you do need to do something more complicated, like if else, if else, if else, 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 you're gonna have to structure it a little bit differently, because it'll stop going down the chain after think 3 levels. So you have to do something like just if this, then do something, and then just to put another if block after that, like if. So like if index is equal to 0, do this section, and then afterwards go if index is equal to 1. So it makes the check a couple extra times than it would normally have to if you're a programmer, but the hit on your performance isn't going to be a problem, and you'll get past the limitation of the 3 levels there. So inside your if else, you could put your conditional comparisons. So you have your logical one. So like if this, that, if or that kind of stuff, right? So if then I could say my variable. So if this variable, we drag it in there. So I'm going to say the age. Well, actually, I want a different one. I'm going to go greater than. Look, wrong one again. Sorry, I took the same one. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to drag age out of there, put it in there, delete that. If age is greater than, I don't know, put a variable of 18. I can put some adult stuff in there, like I can allow you to gamble or something, right? Otherwise, on the else side of things, you could say put an age verification warning message or something like that. Okay, so there you go. If age is greater than 18, so some logic blocks, pretty straightforward. And then we only allow you to do one looping construct, and that's with this for loop there. If you need it, it's there available for you, and you can, it's got some uses for sure. Okay, just want to talk. So I'm going to hit save on this. If you hit OK, you'll hit save on that. So I want to go back to the purchase order one here. Okay, so I'm going to just do a design on that again. So I mentioned most of the applications follow the same structure in the sense that we have a list and a document, right? So we have the lookup page, and then we have the actual document. Well, inside those documents, most of them follow the same kind of flow as well. Okay, so we have, if you look at a purchase order document, it'll be pretty close to being the same as a transfer order document. It'll be the same as the sales order, the shipping or warehouse shipment, warehouse receipt, picks and putaways, all those documents. They're all pretty much the same, and that's just the nature of Business Central, right? So we have lines, we have a header, we have a lines. On those lines, we need to update quantities, we need to set item tracking, we have bin management, license plating, stuff like that. So they're all functionally the same. They're just using different table data for the most part. So the good news is if you learn one of these documents, you can probably understand all of them without having to spend that much more effort actually looking into it. But on the first time you do look at, if you're doing an application override, you're gonna have to look through this, and you're gonna have to figure out where it is that you're actually intending to do your customization for, right? Okay. Now, we don't want you modifying these, okay? And that's why when you open up one of our base ones, it pops up a message saying, this is a read-only application, because the last thing we want you to do is to come in here and say, okay, well, when we post the document, so this is the block, so this is my override that I want to do. I want to post a document, and we're asking whether they want to confirm, and they say yes, they want to confirm. Then we go ahead and run this event inside Business Central to actually post it, and then we close the document. Well, we don't want you coming in here and saying, okay, well, I'm going to put my own custom code in here, and let's just call it, I'm going to do a run event, right? So run event. So instead of just doing a post purchase order, I also wanted to do, say something like, printing some documents, right? So I want to print the purchase order packing slips that came in with it or something, or ask for a signature and then print that. We don't want you to put your code in here and then save this. And then because of the reason is when we do an upgrade to Warehouse Insight, we override all these base applications, and you're going to lose everything you did. And then you'll have to constantly keep, remembering to go put your code changes back in. And of course, you may have a delay in that side of things for you, and then your users aren't getting the same functionality they were used to. So yeah, you can't modify our base applications, but you will need to look through them to see where it is that you need to do your customization. All right, so I look in here and say, let's say, well, if I wanted to do that same customization, well, I want to pop up, a message or something on there and change my own flow. That's fine. So this is the part where we're going to take a look at this. So what you can do is you can go into the application that you want to do an override for. So let's just do a sales outbound document. I should have one available. I'm not sure where my system's at. Okay, so if you scroll down here on the right-hand side of the sales document, we have a bunch of fact boxes that show you all the hookups that are available for the current application you're looking at. So, fine line templates, scan behavior, stuff like that. But the one that we're interested in is the overrides. So right now, currently, sales outbound does not have any overrides. So if I was wanting to override, so I can just come in here, I can go create. Okay. So it's going to create a application override for you, and it's going to fill in some of the defaults for you. You can create multiple overrides for a single application, and a good example of us doing that is our add-on catalog, where we might have multiple different add-ons for the warehouse receipt document. So we have a bunch of different application overrides, documents like this, and for the most part they don't conflict. But when you're making your own, you probably only ever need the one because you're just making for the one customer, and you would just keep adding to this. So let's say you need a second customization for something else. That's fine. You just keep adding to the same application override. So let's take a look at what it gave us. So we have just a general name for the application. So we just prefix it with some override information, or OR, and then the name of the application that got overridden. Brief description. This is the application that is actually getting overridden. Or overridden is maybe a bad word, extended, we'll call it, right? And then an application code that is for us. So any blocks that we do need to add are going to get put into this application code that we created. So it's created a new, application behind the scenes for us called OR Sales Out Doc. So I'll come back to this. So let's just do a refresh on this page. So we will see our OR sales document now on our list here. Okay, so this is what it created for us, and it is just a blank application. Okay, so we can add whatever blocks we want in here. Now, the way these overrides are working is essentially we're taking the application blocks that are here and we are merging them in with the base application that's being overridden. So if you remember, there was a when the form opens block already on the base application. So you shouldn't add another one here because there's already one there and you can't control which one is going to get fired first, or even if the second one might get fired at all. Because what it's doing behind the scenes is this is just an XML at the end of the day that gets generated. We're taking the XML from this and just appending it to the other XML. So you have, just think of them as nodes. So when the form open block node, and then later on you'd have another bunch of blocks from yourselves being added into that XML document. So don't add the same blocks that are already there, but instead you can add custom blocks or custom event blocks. So that's one of these, like an example here. So custom event. Think of this as a function name or procedure name. Okay, so your custom procedure. And I could say my on open form. My on form open. There we go. Let's do that. So my on form open. So I have a custom function called my on form open. Nothing's calling it. Just think of this as being inside the other application. Again, there's nothing that would call this, but that's fine. And you could pop in there a little message box. So let's just do display a message. And who doesn't like the good old hello world? All right, so we could do that. So there's your message. If we save this, fine. So we've got our application being saved. And again, nothing's calling this. So even though it's now exists as part of our sales order application, there's nothing to trigger this event. So if we go back to the sales out document, and I scroll down to our overrides, and I'm just going to configure that one. All right, so again, you could certainly have stuff like that, and then we'll come back to some of the different options there, but we're going to start with the first way of looking at things, and I'm going to just flip this screen over here, and I just want to give you a chance to look at that. Yeah, so we'll come back to some of the tips and tricks. How's that? So when we're looking at the application overrides, we have three basic categories. So we have on before existing, on after existing, and potentially new additions. So things like adding your own custom menus to the sales order. Okay. So the first one we're going to look at is on before existing. Okay. So back to Business Central. So we have in here the events. So these are all basically map up to the events that we saw on the application designer. So form open, close, when something gets scanned, that kind of stuff, right? So if we look at when the form opens, so this is the event, the top level event that we're looking at. You have two options. You can do before and after, and it's similar to what you'd see inside like AL subscription event models. Before, the code that you add here, or the indication, the stuff that you add here, will fire before any of the base code inside of the sales document before opens. And then you have the option to say whether or not you want the base code to also continue to execute. Okay. Or you can do after, and in which case then all the base code will fire, and then eventually your addition will get added to it. So if I do after, so we still want all the base code. So let's say I wanted to add that message box or the message displayed to the user. Maybe it's something like, make sure to sign all documents, or make sure to get the packing slip printed and attached or stapled, whatever. You can just simple message to the user. I'm going to put it after. I still want all the base stuff that was inside the application to run, like setting all the fields, the grids, the title of the page, that kind of stuff. So you hit after. And then you have to specify, well, which custom event are you going to trigger as a result of the after execution? So my on form open, I think is what I call it. My on form open, and I want to execute the base event. So again, you kind of need to remember what this matches up to, but if you take a look here, take that, Control C, and if I go design, right, so you'll see that that matches up to that, my on form open. So we want to make sure those are the same. You will make that, and then now whenever the form opens, it'll call that. So let's just take a look at that in practice here. So I'm going to reload the configuration on the handheld. And I'm going to go into shipping. I'm just not sure which location I'm currently set for. I'm going to choose that. Oops. As not, so just give me 1 second to change it around. Set to blue. Let's put this into silver, and let's make it grid view to make it simpler. By the way, that device configuration is the one we're talking about, that context block, use device configuration. All those variables on that page are what's getting added to the context when you include one of those blocks. So reloading this configuration. And let's choose something else. Right, so on after, we have our hello world, and you can see it's after because we already have the status bar that got updated as a result behind the scenes. The title is shipping, and now it's going to try to load the document. Okay, so that's on after. Of course, on before, we could do the same thing. You know, maybe you don't want all of the functionality to be the same. So as you know, say edit application on here, and it's going to bring up the base application. So you can design. Right, so on form open, you know, if I scroll it out a bit, you know, maybe you want to change some of the stuff in here for whatever reason. That's fine. You could do on before, set it to not execute any of the base events, and then just making sure to, you know, add whatever relevant blocks that you do need to have back into your on form open so that the rest of the application continues to function appropriately. And to do that is one of the tips and tricks. You can do a copy paste. So you could copy this an entire blocks. If you do this, so duplicate just duplicates the one block on the current page, but copy will bring the blocks into the clipboard. So if I hit copy and I go back out to our override application, I design on that one, and then I hit paste. Now it's a little bit confusing because sometimes it drops it way off on the left and makes it look like you didn't paste it in, but it's there. So just, you know, scroll to your left and you'll probably find the blocks. But as you can see, it brought in all of the blocks, you know, for that event. I could then drag that as is right over here, and essentially would have the same functionality as the base app. So we did on before, don't execute the base one, and it will execute all this, and you wouldn't see any difference in the application. But then you could come in here and you could change some of the behavior or do whatever you want with that kind of stuff. But we don't really want that, so that's fine. We're going to hit cancel to exit without saving. So we have on before, on after. Okay, so that's your a good example there. So on after, if we want to do on before, let's just do one for posting. Let's just complete that example there. So I want to see what the posting example is for the sales order. You can hit Control F on here, and it's not the same as your browser's find. This Control F is inside the block lane. You can see when I hit Control F, it shows up here in this little search control over there. And you can type in post, and it'll highlight all the blocks and text within the page that has the word post in it. And then you can use the up down arrow keys to bring into focus the blocks, you know, one by one, and see where it is. So if you're not sure where it is and you don't want to scroll and, you know, try to find anything like that, you can use the post to do the searching for you until you find what you want. Another option, if you're looking for something you know, not sure where it is on the page, is you can collapse all the blocks. Okay, so it gives it a little bit of a cleaner, so you see just the kind of like the top level and just a brief summary of what kind of what's going in there. Okay. And then you can also do clean up the blocks, and this is going to stack them on top of each other. Okay, So now you don't have to scroll left and right anymore. You can just scroll up and down, and you'll be able to see all the blocks at the top level from the events that are being fired. And maybe that'll be easier for you to find what you're looking for. So like when post, let's see here. I don't know if I can find out. I'm not reading fast enough as I go through this. Okay, so even that wasn't enough. So I'm going to do the Control F. I'm going to find post. Oops. There we go. So it's highlighted the first one for me. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to take that off to the side, and then I'm going to expand those blocks to get a better feel what's going on and keep everything else hidden there for me. So let's just say we want to throw up our own confirmation at the beginning of the on post that says, you could check for some variable settings or some field settings, but we're just going to pop up a message saying, have you signed the document? I've been saying sign the shipping or the packing slip. So that's fine. So we're looking at this. Now we don't want to necessarily lose some of this functionality. We still want to post, but I don't want to implement it all myself. I just essentially just want to change this message here from are you sure you want to post to being did you sign something? Okay. So the easiest way, like I said, is to just hit copy. Okay. So I'm going to go back out into our application designer. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a design here. And I'm going to paste this in for myself. Okay, so on post document. Now I don't want two of these events like this because if I do, I can't guarantee which one happened. It's even possible that both get fired, in which case, you get posting twice, you get error message. So I'm just going to change this function name slightly to be my on post document. I'm going to keep all the rest of this the same as is, right? So I still want all this if checks to fire. Okay, I just want to change this message here. Now, the variables that we talked about here, they're still in context. So again, you got to think of like these blocks as just being inside of the other application. So the dialog result variable still exists, manually posted block still exists. Everything else that you need is still there, right? It's just if you want to create a new new events or new variables, you certainly can inside here. But when you're using them in here, you don't have to worry about recreating dialog result to use it. Okay, so I'm just going to change this. So, I'm going to get rid of some of this weird text here. Now, this ship confirm post, like it's not a real sentence, but what it is, it maps up to the translations that we have with inside Warehouse Insight and Business Central. So we just have that because we support multiple languages. So this might translate out to be something in French or German or English. You're probably only developing for one customer, so their language is going to be whatever it is. So you can just use that language and type it in. You don't need to go to the hoops of creating translations. Confirmation, and then just something like, did you sign the packing slip? So we still hit yes. If they hit no, we're doing nothing, but maybe we'll put in a message that says, we'll do an else in there and say that you can't. I'm going to throw an error message. I'll find one that's display an error. Display an error, I'll drop that into the else. And then, you can keep dragging on these little blocks. Sometimes I find it easier though just to duplicate like one of the blocks that's close by and just drag it over. Must be signed. Company policy. Okay, so something like that, and you don't have to have a title on the error message. By default, it'll pop in error, but I'll just do that as well, anyways. Error. Okay, something like that. So pretty straightforward. But now we've taking control of that custom event. So my on post document. So I'm going to save that. So I'm going to take that. Now, if this had been a top level event, so if there had been something like on form close, so we could, on form close is going to call the on post document event. I'm sure if we take a look at it, it'll flow through. But what we've specifically overridden is the custom event on post document. Okay, so for that, there's a special one in here called custom. So you click on that, and we're going to do the before because we want to take ownership of it. Okay, so the custom event name, so this has to be what it already was. Okay, so it's on post document. That's the name of the custom function that we want to extend or override. And then the one that we're going to call in addition to that, depending on the action. So before this one gets called, we're going to call ours, and then we're going to set it to not execute the base event so that it no longer calls on post document. So we're going to get our custom confirmation messages and error messages if they do so. So if I go back to our document now, if you're familiar with using Warehouse Insight and developing, you'll be familiar with reloading the configuration, and that's just basically taking in all our latest changes and bringing it into memory here. So I'll go to shipping. I don't think I had one of these. Choose. So our custom message from before. And then if I hit post now on this one, so we get now our flow. So did you sign the packing slip? If I hit yes, it's going to go and post this document, just like it did in the base stuff. If I hit no, which is what I'm going to do, I should get my error message. So I get no. And there you go. The error message, it must be signed, company policy. Pretty easy. Okay. That can cover a lot of your customizations. So, just as an example, if I come back into design, if you look at some of these action blocks in here, so, you can see run event, that's one you're going to use quite a bit is, this one's here in order to call events inside Business Central. Now, everything is an event, and we're going to talk about that in a second here. Okay. But you can get run event, but there's also other ones like get data set get data set that allows you to query for table data from Business Central without writing any code at all. So as a consultant or even developer, you can come in and you can make a lot of customizations without actually having to write any AL code whatsoever, depending on what the nature of the customization is, right? You can even have it open up web pages or run Android intents, stuff like that. Like there's a lot of functionality you can do just within this Blockly Designer. And then especially when you start leveraging some of our base events, like, like this posting a sales order. So you don't have to write the post sales order event yourself. You can just call one of our events that already exist. And we have, obviously lots for all the various applications. Okay, so let's talk about the events and how they also apply to your customizations. So a good one to look at that is starting off, we're going to do another customization here, but it is a new addition. So, these two cover things like extending some of the functions or events that are already inside that Blockly Designer. But sometimes it's your modification you need is only to just display a whole new set of functionality, not interact with anything ours, like maybe prompt for a signature or show user comments, like the ability to show line comments or something to the user in the sales order. So you don't need to interact with modifying any of our stuff, but you want to extend and add more functionality or features on top of the base application. So you're not going to add anything here, but you might need to go and add a menu. So let's look at the sales order again. So we have all our standard events in here, and I'm going to go configure under the menus. Okay, so these are all the sales order menus. Some of them are hidden, some of them aren't. I don't want to spend too much time on the menu side of things, but you'll get an idea since we put one through. So let's add a new one here called show comments or something like that. Show comments. Okay, so I'm adding a whole new menu to the sales order. I didn't need to override anything just yet. So hit show comments. If you look on here, you get the properties dialog for the menu that you just created. And you can see we're modifying the application sales document. So the first thing you probably want is an icon for this. So I'm just going to choose one of the ones that already exist. I'll just do the hide completed one. Why not? Show comments. Okay, so hide completed. So you got an icon now for show comments. You can use a lot of this other stuff, like the properties on. So whether or not it has to have a line before you can click on it. If you want to give it a shortcut, like Enter or Control or F2 or something like that, you can give it shortcuts. Even you can have it immediately call events what's inside Business Central based on the event ID. But for now, we're going to just use the standard action, and this is most typical for us. We do a standard action, and the two most common things you're going to use for your extensions are either start application or custom application. Start application just launches a whole new application. So let's say you want to open up, item inquiry. You do start application and you pass it the item inquiry application document. But the other one is the custom application event, where we call one of our custom functions inside the Blockly. That's what we want to do there. And then you get the secondary property dialog or panel here, and which just has one option for you specifying what event inside the Blockly designer are you going to be using, and that is going to be my on show comments. Okay, so I'm just going to remember what that is by copying it. Okay, so I got an event, so show comments, that when clicked will call my on show comments function inside the application designer. Okay, so that's good there. And then I need to go back to my override, because again, I don't want to modify sales out document. I want to modify the override. So I'm just going to find it here. Configure. I'm going to design it. Okay, and I'm just going to move off to the side here, and I'm going to add a new custom event. And I'm going to duplicate this, put that over there, and I'm going to change the name of this function to be my on show comments. Okay, so now I have something that actually will get fired by the menu, so it'll fire this, and now it's not doing anything. And you can do whatever you want within here. You can go get the data and you could pop it up in a grid. And if we change this slightly to just be let's add comment, my on add comment, because that'll be easier to show. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go back and change my event to do that. So let's just do that now. Menus, we'll configure this. I just want to change this, so it's going to be add comment. And then our custom application there, my on add comment. So better example because it's easier to show. Not that you can't do the other one, or you can't do a whole bunch of things, but for the purpose of just demoing this, it'd be easier if I just change it to this, add comment. Okay, and I'm just going to cheat and go find overall sales document and design that. Okay, so now that menu is calling my on add comment. We can put in an interaction block asking for the comment, ask for text, drag one of those over and drop it on. And we'll give it a little prompt there. I'll say enter a comment. Okay, whether or not it has to have a default value or not, doesn't matter. You can specify max length like 50 characters, whatever you want. We'll get into all the details. If you do want to see more details about these blocks, I think I'll have a link I can show you here afterwards. Okay, close on barcode scan, and then if they did okay, variables, I have to create a variable called dialog result. And that's just specific to this block here. Oh, it already does exist because we copied it in. Okay, so dialog result already exists. So we say logic if logic, and then we're going to drop our variable in there, dialog result. And if it equals, now it's one of these special variables down here, this OK one, drag it on there. So for for the dialog result is OK, so they hit OK on the dialog. After entering the comment, we'll flow through this. Otherwise, we won't do anything if they hit cancel. I prefer, just generally speaking, if you're going to be doing development, don't do does not equal cancel. I mean, functionally, it's the same, right? So if they hit OK, you get not equals cancel, then do some flow. But there's some weird cases, like, where you say, like, what is the X button on the top left corner of a dialog? Is that cancel, or was that just like closing the dialog? So it's better to always just check for the one very specific affirmation, which is, did they actually hit OK, instead of hitting the back button on Android? Is that the same as cancel or not? So dialog result equals OK, and then we'd have some sort of action to take after that. So you look down to the actions. So we talked about run event being the most popular one that we have. So they're alphabetical, so you can just find the one you want. Run event. And this is where we need to now kind of talk about event IDs and what they mean in the sense of warehouse insight and overrides. So this run event is going to call an AL procedure in Business Central. So you have to write an extension code either to handle this or find an existing event of our own that you can leverage. Everything has an ID. So every event, so whether it's posting, getting a sales order document, opening up item inquiry, you name it, like even getting them in, they all have an event ID associated with them in the back end. All of our events are between like the range of 0 and I think 100,000 roughly. Historically speaking, though, we've asked that everybody have any custom events that you write of your own. You start your numbering at the 2 million and higher range. So doesn't really matter what you choose after that, but anything 2 million higher, and that's not that you can't go less than that, but if you go less than that, you might confuse one of the internal developers here and they're thinking that, maybe the event they're looking for is one of our own custom or one of our own versus a custom one. So as soon as we see something higher than 2 million, we know immediately it was a customization made by somebody, not a base application event. So I am just going to put in 2 million for right now. I'm just going to drop it in there. And we're going to talk about where you can see those numbers. 3, 1, 2, 3. So 2 million. So ID number 2 million. And I'm going to save that. Okay. So we have a menu option that calls my on add comment, opens up, asks for a text document. If they hit OK, it's going to run event 2 million. Okay. And then we're going to go out of here and we're going to talk about events. So if you look at Warehouse Insight application events, you'll see this table first thing. Okay, so these are all the events that are currently out of the box provided by Warehouse Insight, and they're used by, like I said, every one of our base applications. Anything it's doing is calling an event in here. So they have categories. So common versus, say, you get into item inventory inquiry or bin inquiry, ad hoc moves, warehouse activity. I'm going to expand this column a bit here. Warehouse activity documents, production, receiving, shipping, that kind of thing, right? So if I was looking for shipping, post sales order document, there, right? So when that function that we just looked at earlier gets called, it calls the event 70,004 and does the actual posting of the sales order. For yourselves, you would want to come, to the end of this list and create your own 2 million. You don't necessarily have to do this if you aren't creating columns, custom data sets to return back, but probably good practice anyways to do this as in a general rule. So you create your own custom event in here, call it 2 million, and give it a category like, I don't know, my customizations, whatever you want to call it. And then, you can give it the function. So, add comment. Okay. So there, you've created an event, at least you've given it the definition here. Everything else on the right, you aren't going to need to do. This is really more specific to creating add-ons that are going to be reused or following a different pattern for making your customizations. 99.9999% of the people doing customizations and extensions and overrides out there, this is all you have to do. You don't have to do anything more than this. Okay. But that doesn't get you anything much more than I've just defined an event. It's still not being handled. Okay. So if we look at the AL side of things, and I'm not gonna go and create this function here. We're just gonna assume it is. But so the first thing you need to do is you need to subscribe to this on before process event. Okay. Just going to write there. We are going to do this again, or look at this again in the next instance as well, and because we're almost at the end of this. So you can do the Control or Shift Alt E to find it and add it in. Most of the time, so any customizations that you're making that are new additions, so like this new menu one that we're doing, you are going to be doing the on before process event. So you have that definition, and then you're going to put in a lowercase, so you're basically going to handle that event ID that just got fired by your customization. So in our case here, it was 2 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 million. We're going to call the function add comment, and then we're going to pass it in these 3 variables here. At the top level, this prec event params, it matches up to the context that you saw that we talked about at the page levels, right? So all the key value pairs that were available to you at the application level that's going to be in this prec event param. So it's just a record, but it's the field name equals the value that got passed. So anything or everything and anything available on that page at the current time that event got called will be available to you in prec event params. Okay, so if we did say we had age, first name, last name, you'd be getting age, first name, last name as variable names out of this. This output parameter, that's just basically the text that needs to be returned back to the handled, whether or not, if you were returning data sets or just a confirmation message that it did get added, stuff like that. And then lastly, we have this flag here, which is this whether or not the event got handled. For your new additions that you're doing, you're definitely going to be setting this to true, because if you don't set it to true and indicate that you handled this event, it's then going to try to find a code unit within Business Central, like one of ours, to process that event ID, and then it's going to generate an error saying that it couldn't find a code unit to handle it. So you definitely need to handle it. So add comment comes down here, and I'm not going to do this one. Actually, I had made up. It was for a purchase order, but you get this. The idea that we want in here is good enough for us, right? So we set our override to true. So we said we handle it, and then we get some values out of that context that we had. So first thing would be like the document number that came back. So the variable name in the page is number, like this, or actually, well, it's the field name, but it ends up being a context variable. And then that dialog, that enter text dialog that we put on, also generates an action result variable with the text that was entered by the user. And then the rest of this is just simply just getting the document and creating the record link for you. We're not going to publish this. Our thing will fail when we fail to publish it, but we're going to take a look at our code just to see it in action. So if I open up 1015 again, hello world, we should have a new menu option for add comment. So there it is now. Adding comment will pop up that block that we asked for, entering comment, damaged goods, something like that. If I hit OK, this will most likely generate an error because event 2 million isn't being handled. We'll see. Well, I'll say cancel. It's fine. Just hit cancel. It's not going to do it. And that's fine. So, we didn't add a comment, but if you'd execute this base flow code here. So one thing to kind of assist you when you're trying to figure out what variables are available to you in that flow is to use the inspect context blocks. So just another little tip and trick there for using Designer. So let's say you're in add comment and you don't know that the document name variable is number, and you didn't know dialog, what dialog result was, or you didn't know what action result was, or what you're not intimately familiar with all the variables in the fields. You can use this interaction block we have down here at the bottom called inspect context, and you can throw it in there. So I'm going to put it in right after we ask for the text. I'm going to drop it in between there and hit save. And then when I go back to my flow, I'm just going to reload it again. And just open that one up. Okay, so now when I add comment, if I just move it over, you'll see ask for text, and then it's going to throw up this inspect context. My comment. Okay, so this is the inspect context block in action. Now, it's listed all the variables and line context and header context, and even the device configuration context in here, right? So there's a lot of context being passed around in this environment. But, it's alphabetical. You can take a look. So if you're looking for, I want to see where my comment got added as a variable. I know it's going to be called action result. So I'll just skip there. There it is, right? It's actions being the first one. But, you could search through the list on the value side until you found my comment, and then you'd be like, oh, okay, the variable name is going to be action result. And then just flipping back over to the AL side of thing, you can see where I'm looking for the value of my comment, or so the variable that's holding my comment, and that's action results. So then I'm just using this little accessor method on the event params record that got passed in called get value that returns the string of this thing. Okay, there's other ones, helper functions for like get decimal, get integer, get date kind of thing, right? So if the value coming back was one of those different types of data types, you can use that. But in this case, it's a string. And same thing, on number, right? Like if you look down here at NO, the number, right? So there's NO. The variable NO period is 1015. Okay, stuff like that. So you can find them all rather than just trying to hunt and guess. You can put one of those inspect context blocks anywhere on the page. It'll show you all the current context data that's available. And this gets passed back to Business Central no matter which event you're firing. So like any event that we fire, all that inspect context stuff is included in this prec event params record. Okay. So we've covered basically on before, on after, and then using, a new addition for a custom block override. Okay. This ideally, like this application overrides and this functionality here that we just spent the majority of our time on, ideally will be the only thing you need to do long term. Okay. So between that and the AL overrides. Okay. The next part we're going to show you is certainly available for you at any time, and it's not going away, but it's what I like to think of as more like the nuclear options. Like you couldn't find a way to solve your problem any other way. All right, this is your last resort kind of thing. Sometime in the future, we'll have enough published events to do anything, and between those and these event overrides, or application overrides, you should be able to accomplish what you need. Just going back to the tips and tricks, I said I kind of look over it. I think we've covered pretty much all of this on this page, right? So we kind of talked about variables and how to clean up the blocks and how to get an understanding of what's going on by using the spec context. If you do have any questions, let support know. Like if you don't understand how some of the blocks are working or how our program flow works, fire off an email to support. We'll definitely be able to help you out. Okay, so the last one I alluded to is kind of like the nuclear option, right? So we provide two specific events, and we looked at one of them already. So it's on before process event and on after process event. And they are exactly what the name implies. Before any event gets fired in the system, or before any code gets executed for any event, event ID. Sorry, I'll stop using the word event. So any event ID, we have an on before process event. You can hook into that and you can override our stuff or just slightly add to it if you can find a way to do that. On before, and that's anything. Like, so whether we're getting the activity document, whether we're posting a sales order document, we're getting menus for a page, right? They're all events, event IDs, and you can use the on before process event to hook into that and take ownership of yourself. On after process event, same thing. After the base event code is run, you can write an AL extension event handler to handle it as well. And you don't use it as much. On before definitely gets used a lot more than on after. On after would be good for things like you want to print the sales order document after they've posted it or something like that. So you just let the base stuff flow through and then you do the on after process event. Again, I wouldn't necessarily use some of these if I could use the application overrides myself. So, instead of like that example, so on after post sales order, so basically 70,004 or something like that. So you let stuff go and then you come in and you hook into 70,004 and you write some code to do some stuff. I might be more tempted to put my own application override there and say like, okay, so on after that flow happens or something, put another set of blocks in there to then call my own event, 2,000,005, something like that. So let's just take a quick look back at the visual code though for that, right? So we have on after process event or on before process event. So when we're talking about overriding our stuff, so we're not implying this 2 million range. That's for your own customizations as a result of doing something. We're talking about you want to extend do something with 70,004, which was my before post sales order, something like that, right? I'm just going to copy and paste these in. Okay, so I'm saying it's 70,004. Let's just double check that I wasn't misleading myself here. So if I go to events, warehouse insight events, so scrolling down to 70,004. Yes, that is post sales order. It's going to do some stuff. You may not know what it is. If you have Business Central, so if it's been published to Business Central, you can step into our code and get the symbols and take a look at the code of what's happening there. If you're on premise, unfortunately, the code's hidden. So you may need to contact us to get an idea what's happening under the hood if you needed to know. Sales order posting is pretty straightforward. You probably don't need our stuff to handle it yourselves. But it's a 70,004. So now if I look back at here, so 70,004 on before sales order post. Local procedure. I do like the new, oops, I get used to switching back and forth. I do like the new visual code with the AI integration. Very handy, I mean. Okay, so I got a functionality. So right now, before 70,004, our stuff gets fired in 70,004. It's going to call this function. You would probably, most often, if you're overriding it at the before level, you're going to set the override flag to true. All right, so you're going to say, okay, I handled it myself. Then you're going to get the variables, do some posting, and then, probably because you want to do something else, do some printing, right? Or whatever, do some posting and invoicing. Maybe modification is actually to do a post and invoice, kind of ship and invoice. Okay, so obviously pseudocode there, we haven't done anything, but in a sense now at this point, you're no longer calling the base Warehouse Insight posting routines. You've totally handled it yourself. You can do the on after as well. So on after process, something like that, on after process event. And this is the other one that always gets fired no matter where you are in this or what you're doing in the system, right? So I'm going to let IntelliSense take over. And I want to do, okay, so that, and then 70,004 by not after post sales order, which doesn't exist, but we can. Now you notice that there isn't an option to override the event because you're past that point. Oops. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we have on after post sales order. And again, you can get the same variables out of the context. So we've read params. The big text output is going to potentially, depending on where you are, already have some data coming into it as a result of the posting. But in this case, it probably won't. And you could do something else. So like at this case here, I could do, get the variables and then print this. And sales slips, right? Something like that. So you let the base code flow through, and then you go ahead and on top of that, print the sales documents. Okay, two ways to do it. Again, the nuclear option, definitely when you're looking at this, right? So if you are in the case here, trying to override our functionality completely, you certainly can. And there are lots of cases where you do have to do so. The problem is, of course, you need to kind of know what we're doing under the hood so that you're not at least losing something that was important. It could be anything from like creating license plates or setting the item tracking lines. But the other problem is it can be difficult to inject the change, right? Because again, you don't know necessarily where it is in the code you want to change. Let's say it's like a small thing. Let's say you're updating a sales line, the quantity, and when the quantity gets changed, you wanted to add extra item tracking information, like setting a lot information or a lot record, or maybe added new fields to the reservation systems, stuff like that. If there's an exposed integration event, you then have to, do that whole override for you, right? So there's a lot, like I said, a lot of stuff that goes into that, but the things that we're doing inside those functions aren't necessarily always exposed to you. So a lot of our functions are marked as local, though I think there's been a movement here lately to push everything to being public again. So that may be less of an issue, but still, like we're going to call a bunch of our own internal local functions, and you don't have access, then you may end up having to duplicate all that code as well in order to get the same functionality, just so you could, put one small change into the reservation system. Okay. And as mentioned, all of our stuff leverages the on before process events. So doesn't matter what we're doing, you'll have the ability to hook into that to override our stuff if you want to. But please don't if you don't have to. If you can do it some other way, certainly go that approach first. Okay, and that's pretty much the end of the presentation. But yeah, if you do have any questions about this topic or anything, just reach out to us here at InsideWorks, and we would be happy to help you. All right, thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content, and remember to hit that bell icon to stay updated. See you in the next video.